Hello and welcome everybody to yet another podcast. Today we have a very special guest, someone who I've wanted to talk to for a long time on this podcast, Julian Saad. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Tim. It's lovely to be here.
So, as I said before this call, I'm very excited for your insights on mindset because, as important as the tactics and the strategies might be, especially as entrepreneurs know, our biggest enemy is usually ourselves and our mind, and that's what you help people with. So I'm very excited for what you can teach us today. Before we get into that, please, Julian, tell us about your story. How did you end up here? How did you become a mindset coach? And walk us through the entire journey.
Man, thank you, Tim. Thank you, firstly, for having me. Yeah, so we've known each other for a while, so I'm happy that we're getting to do this after all this time. But let's see how much more we get to know each other after this time together. But a little bit about me and how I got into coaching. I remember it's a funny story, Tim, because I remember when I was much younger, maybe 5 years ago. I remember waiting in the clinic of a doctor's office. I was waiting for an appointment and I was still in college. I had come to visit my family where they were living. And every time, because in college I didn't have my doctor there, I would always take opportunity when I was visiting to go to the doctor. And I Googled on my phone, I'll never forget, and I don't know why I Googled it, but I'll never forget I Googled how to become a life coach or how to be a life coach. And the answer, you know what Google said? Google said something like, this was before ChatGPT. So Google said, you have to be 56 and have a lot of experience. And I remember thinking to myself, like, shit, like, man, like, I remember just being discouraged, being a little bit upset, not being too happy with the answer, obviously. And then I just went back to college doing my normal stuff. I was studying psychology in college and stuff. So I was always interested in mindset. I was studying neuroscience, psychology, always interested in the way humans work, the way they interact. All the jobs I had had up to then were all sales kinds of jobs, people person jobs. Then once I graduated, I was doing a bunch of different industries, all of which were people industries, right? So you had I remember doing fashion, doing a little bit of music consulting, events management. What's the main theme there, Tim, huh? What's the main theme?
People.
The people. Exactly. Like I remember loving talking to the camera people, loving talking to the makeup artist, the wardrobe, everything. I just loved that more than yeah, and music. I remember I love music. I always love music, but I liked more the client management of things, talking to the client, getting to know them, seeing their taste. So I always was very intrigued in the people side of things, and I thought, that's when I realized that experimentation is a big driver of purpose. Like you to really find that life's purpose, as everybody's in the search for, to really find what you want to do in life, you gotta experiment. You gotta try shit out and fail while taking action, right? You're gonna fail anyway, so might as well fail towards taking action. But just to answer, I guess the how it became to coaching, it was that just tried a bunch of stuff, and then I, as just like you, found the online world, and I mean, I can tell you the full story if you want to hear the full story of what really
Yeah,
said
man.
it. Do you want to
Go
hear
ahead.
the full story? So I graduated my college, and like I told you, I was doing all these different jobs, and I was so lost. Right? I'm sure you relate. You've had this feeling of before, I'm sure, starting your brand, and maybe even sometimes while being in your brand, you've been lost, right? You know what it feels like. And I remember telling my father, I was like, I'm at a crossroads. I don't know what to do. I was living alone. So I said, listen, I'm going to start applying to jobs. I was applying to a bunch of 9 to 5s, trying to see, maybe I get something there. Tim, you know how many jobs I applied for, man? I applied for like 50 jobs. I got 10 interviews. Can you guess how many offers I got from those 10 interviews? How many offers do you think I got?
I mean, if you're asking like that, probably like one, two, zero.
Zero. Zero, man. Zero offers. And so I go to my father and I tell him, listen, dad, I don't want a job. I think the people who were trying to hire me could notice I didn't want it because energy doesn't lie. So they could see the energy I was showing up with in those interviews was not energy of somebody who wants it. Right. So that's what I realized. So I told him, listen, I don't want the jobs. God doesn't want to give me one of these jobs clearly because no one's giving it to me. So I said, let's make a deal. I'm going to come back and live with you for the next 12 months. And I want to make an actual deal. Like I needed to cut safety net. I needed to cut crash pad. I needed to remove every kind of potential, backing that I had. Because when I was living alone, so I said, I'm going to come back and live with you for the next 12 months, but we have to make a deal. You have to keep me accountable. 12 months. If in the next 12 months I do not build my own business, make my own money, or do something, then maybe you can help me and you can put me in a 9 to 5. You know people here in the city, you can maybe connect me, maybe something like that. And obviously I didn't want that, but I knew what was waiting for me if that would happen. So now like the real shit started and I had actually to commit to something. And that's when I found the online world, the personal branding world, and started, posting every single day. I committed myself to, posting 3 tweets every day, to, the typical, to, releasing a newsletter once a week. So I started building new layers, new habits, becoming a new person. I stopped going out, stopped seeing my friends. I stopped, drinking, doing everything that I was doing before. Basically, I had to rewire and become a new person. And everything that I was learning every day, I was working like 10 to 12 hours. I was spending 2 to 3 to 4 hours a day learning about, mindset, learning about psychology. Everything I had learned at school, I was going deeper into it in my own time and then testing it on me, treating my life like a science experiment and collecting data on me. And, in the first 6 months, how much money do you think I made, Tim, in the first 6 months?
Zero. Classic.
No, actually, close. I made $49.
Oh,
$49.
that's better than me. My
Man, how much
first
did you
six
make in
months,
the first 6 months?
zero.
Okay.
Nothing.
But me, I'll tell you, Tim, $49 from one digital product that one person bought. That wasn't my father. I promise you it wasn't him. But but one person bought it. And I thought that's when I saw like, oh shit, man, people can really you can really make money online, but it was so little. And I remember being very, if you think about it, I had 12 months, right? And imagine if for 6 out of the 12 months, I've only made this much, and my deal is to at least make something substantial. Like 49 is not close to substantial, is it?
Mm.
So that's when I start being a little bit like, fuck, with everything I do for the past 6 months, was it a waste? Was it, especially when the things I was building, new foundations, new identities, new things that are way more valuable than money. But at the time, you don't see it. So just to close off the story, so thank you for listening. At the end, what happens, I go visit my girlfriend, who at the time we were long distance. She was living in the US. I go to visit her. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take a break from my surroundings. I've been here for 6 months now, locked in the same room. Like, I need to get out. I can still work online. I'll still continue my deal. I'm gonna honor it. But obviously, I get to the US and I get very discouraged. I'm very discouraged. My girlfriend tells me, it's okay. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Everything's going to work out. Patience. Um, and before you know it, man, that maybe that week or that 2 weeks later, I get a DM from someone who says, I read your giveaway. I really need your help with something. Can we please get on a call? And I'm thinking like, okay, that's interesting. We get on a call and the person appears. He turns out to look a little bit older than the type of people I was used to getting on calls with. At the time, I was used to getting on calls with, people our age, younger than us even, and who just didn't have money to want to spend, or they didn't want to spend any money, or I couldn't help. And the guy looked a little bit older, but beyond that, Tim, I asked him. I said, "Where are you in the world?" And he said the exact same little city that I was in visiting my girlfriend. My girlfriend lives in a tiny little city in the US. And he says the exact same city. And I remember like when I said I was there, he kind of went white, like pale, like as if I was stalking him or something, right? But he reached out to me. We go to meet in person. And just to tell you, before we meet in person, we talk. I start seeing the way he talks, I start seeing the language he used, the mindset, the perspectives. And that's when I started putting into practice. Like in that moment, I was like, okay, I didn't even think about it. I just was being very honest with the guy. I didn't know him from a hole in the wall. So I was going to be honest with him. And I started telling him like a bunch of stuff about it. I was like, this is the way you're talking. Do you see the way you're using your language and everything? And then at the end of that hour and a half, he's like, I want to work with you. How much do you charge? I had Tim, I had nothing. I had no offer, nothing. And obviously I said something and I was really smart about how I did it. And what really helped me was that I told him, let's go meet in person. And I think that was great. We went to meet in person at a coffee shop. energy in person is unmatched. So we met, we did that first session in person. He loved it. And imagine doing our second session, we're meeting at the same coffee shop. And I'll finish the story here just so you see how crazy this is. There's a woman sitting right behind him. And I'm thinking, because she's not listening, she's the only one here. She's definitely not listening. We do our session. I go to the bathroom. I come back, Tim. And when I come back from the bathroom, our session is over. My client, who's now my first client, is talking with this woman. I think this is super weird. He's like, Julian, I want to introduce you to this woman. She's been listening to our entire conversation. And she says that I have her life. She wants to know who I work with. Do you mind talking to her? I'm like, what the hell is going on, man? So then I go, I sit with her, and the same thing. She asks me, how much do you charge? I want to work with you. And after we spoke for an hour, and she became my second client. She still is my client till this day, like a year later. And it's that's how really it started without starting. Like obviously now I look back, and obviously those 12 months ended. I went back to my father. I told him by then I went back home. They started referring me to other clients, and I had a coaching practice like that by the seventh or eighth month. And then I went to my dad and I honored my deal. I told him, listen, I've made the deal. I have an actual business that's up and running, and I'm super happy about it. And that's how it kind of became, the thing. Thank you for listening to the long story.
No, that's beautiful. Wow, what a crazy story. Okay, I have a couple of questions, actually a lot of
Please.
questions about that. The first one, the first one, I didn't plan on asking this, but um, when it comes to coaching practices, like, you know, I'm a coach as well, but I
Mhm.
do business coaching, I do copywriting coaching. So it's a little bit different. However, I do think that you, as a mindset coach, which is much more pure in its coaching form, I guess, can give me and other people who do the same things some great insights into how to coach people. So, what are some of the guidelines there that you keep in mind? Like the 10,000 foot view, basically, of how to coach people.
Ooh, it's an interesting question because my definite answer would be though is I do believe every single person has their own unique way, and that's what's good. If we all do it the same way, then obviously it then it just wouldn't be good because we'd be all the same. So I definitely say like being you and having your own unique way of doing it is the best bet. However, that being said, there's there's certain things we can all do, right? And I'd say the first thing, man, that I would say, and two things. One is the power of deep listening, like actual listening, right? Sometimes the best coaching you can do is when you don't talk, when you don't say a word, right? I've experienced that with my coach, the coach that I work with. I always remember that at first I was thinking, this is so weird. Why is he not saying anything? And he would make me feel so uncomfortable because I was like, I've said everything I wanted to say. But then it forced me to say more. And I realized by getting to go thinking deeper and being a little bit more like even sitting with that discomfort, sometimes I felt that I had gotten more out of that session than if he would have spoken when I wanted him to speak. So that's from the coachee's perspective. That's what I noticed, and then I started implementing that in my coaching practices. But when the client talks, I treat it as if it was the person that I will like. Yeah, it's. I always say this. It's like a listening distinction, right? You can put a distinction of asking yourself, like, if I ask you right now, Tim, who's one person, and please answer this, who's one person that if you could right now get to spend the next 2 hours with, but only the next 2 hours, you'll never see them again, you'll never hear from them again. They could be dead or alive. It could be a celebrity. It could be somebody you know. Anything. Who comes to mind that if right now you could listen to them, speak to them, get to know everything about them, you have no phone, no distractions, you get to remember everything they say, you listen with the most curious, with the most non-judgmental ears. Who would that person be for you, Tim? Anybody, dead or alive,
Difficult.
famous or not famous. There has to be
My, f-
one person that comes to mind. Come on.
my first thought was Socrates.
Okay, okay. I like that answer. You see, so if right now you got to sit down with Socrates, you would listen with the most intent, right? What kind of listening would you bring to that?
Just, like being immersed in his words, probably.
No judgment, just pure curiosity, right?
Mm.
So that's what I ask myself every time before a session, and now it's become a habit. But I've kind of primed my mind to treat as if even you here right now. I'm going to treat you as if you were my Socrates. Does that make sense? As
Mm.
if you were Socrates in disguise every time. So every client of mine is my version of that, right? And every time there's different people, right? I remember sometimes for me, that person, I don't remember who it was when I first asked myself that question, but I remember when I first heard it, it stayed with me, and I kind of remembered. I kind of now treat that client like that. So that's probably my best thing, is to treat them like Socrates in disguise. And whoever
Mm.
that person is for you, for your listeners, whoever that one person is for them, they can think about it. Everybody has one person. Everybody has at least one person they could think of who they would listen with the most curious, with the most non-judgmental, with the most open heart, right? That when the words I know come into your mouth, like, oh, I know where he's going with this. I know I've heard this. I know is just code for I'm not listening. So if you can treat it with the most open, curious listening, you're going to find gold. You're going to extract things that you probably wouldn't have heard otherwise, right? What do you think of that?
Mm. That's amazing. The thing about Socrates is his way of philosophizing is he asks you questions, so I'd probably have to talk a little bit, but no, that's
Sure.
amazing advice. That's
And
amazing.
you can talk to him, right? I'm not saying you can't talk, but it's I mean, when you're coaching someone, you're going to talk anyway, right? Like, you're going to be the coach, you're there to talk as well, right? I think we confuse a lot when we say listening. We think, oh, we can only listen and not talk. I think it's when you are listening, are you really listening, right? A lot of people are, sometimes, like I said, the word I know goes in, right? So
Mm.
if you can just remember to treat that person. I think I asked one of my clients that. I said, who's your one person? And they were like, Jesus. I said, great. So I want you to treat me like Jesus in disguise. I want you to, every time I speak, you, and not to hold me into a pedestal and make me feel superior, but because I know that they'll get way more out of it if they try to hear, like, if I say they write right? If I say something, they write that, right? As in, if you treat everything with that, it's a very different approach, right?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. That's very good advice. And looking back on conversations I've had, the best ones, like the most, not the best ones, but the most transformative ones for me personally, have
Mm,
always been where someone just listened to me. Like recently, I was sitting in the sauna with a friend. I was just talking and talking and talking. The guy wasn't even saying anything. I don't even know if he was listening to me. Probably was, but it was so good to just, you know, get those words out, and then to have someone, just nod their head, say, "Man, it's fine. You're not doing as bad as you think you are."
I
So,
like that. Well
okay,
said.
let's move on to a more broad topic. Like, this is a very general question, but what do you think keeps most people stuck in life?
Hmm. The short answer, from my experience at least, this past year, I was thinking, I was counting the other day with we were talking about it with one of the people who works with me on my team. We were talking about it, like, how many people have I worked with this year from all the seminars and workshops, and we said it was upwards of 350 people. And the reason we were looking at it was, one, so we knew the number so we could say it, but two, so that we could see what was the common thread that came out of it. And it's one of the questions was that, what's the main blocker, right? The thing that keeps people stuck. And I think it really boils down to a lack of integrity, like not keeping your promises that you make to yourself. I really think it's that simple. Like, everybody would get much more out of their lives and do and create those incredible, all the lives that everybody envisions they can for themselves, if they just were willing a little bit more to keep the promises they made to themselves. If they treated their own promises like they treat the way they treat everybody else, right? I always ask people, like, what would be different in your life if you treated yourself the way you treat everybody else? And you know what they answered? It's like, oh, I'll be healthier. I'd sleep better and I'd probably make more money. I'm like, okay, then if it's that simple, why aren't you doing it? Because it's hard when you're alone. You let yourself go, right? Oh, I'll eat a little bit more of this chocolate, or I'll spend a little bit more on my phone, or I'll snooze my alarm. It's okay, right? But that's all you're doing, is chipping away at your own self trust, and then it's a shame. You can literally create your future by speaking it if you get in a habit of priming your mind to say one thing and do that thing. The more you say and do, the more anything you say, the more you'll and anything you'll do, then your brain's is going to understand. when Julian says X, Julian does X. So when Julian says he wants to build a thriving and prosperous coaching business, why wouldn't he? Right? His brain saw he did everything else. Make sense?
Mm. Is there any tactical advice for that, or is the secret just brute force your way,
Hmm.
just keep your promises no matter what, discipline?
No,
What are some of
there's
the?
honestly the tactical advice is systems, right? At the end, the current systems we have in place are perfect for the results you're already getting. So really, it's a systems audit, right? There's two types of systems in this world. There's hard systems, which are like reminders, alarms, calendars, right? Those are hard. Like you and I, we had a hard system here today, so we could do this call. You sent me a calendar invite. We had it at the time. That was a system for me to make sure I have it. Now, what makes me show up here? Because I can still have a reminder. I had a reminder to show up here. So if I had this reminder to show up, I can ignore that reminder, right? You can ignore the alarm that wakes you up. So that's the soft system, right? At the end, you need a combination of hard and soft systems to uphold the commitment. Any commitment will be really a commitment if it's matched by hard and soft systems. So, like, I always ask people, I'm like, have you ever missed a plane? Have you ever missed a flight out of your own accord? And usually the answer is, I mean, you tell me, Tim, have you ever
No,
intentionally missed a plane?
no.
Is because you have a system, right? You probably have a system of getting to the airport 2 hours early. You make sure you have your luggage ready, like ready before traveling. You pretty if you it's like some people have a to do list with everything they got to take, right? You have some kind of system, right?
Yep, one
But
hundred
then
percent.
there's something that gets you there. And the soft system is like a deep internal thing inside of you. It's like the why, right? It's like what like you for your business even. Why are you doing what you're doing? Well, there's a deep thing inside of you. There's a purpose. There's a reason. So that's your soft system. So the combination of having the soft system and the hard turns any intention into a commitment, right? At the end, you want it to be how do you commit to something? Well, you gotta check your systems and make them foolproof, like foolproof, watertight, watertight. Like they have to be so tight. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yes, definitely. As for like the soft systems, is there any way to make those more reliable? Because I feel like for a lot of people,
Mm.
it's so easy to lie to yourself, right? It's so easy to, ignore the alarm clock, press the snooze button. Are there any ways to make those soft systems more reliable?
Mm. Yeah, man. That's a good question to make them more reliable. Yeah, because you're right. You're right. It's easy to ignore an alarm. It's easy to snooze it. But I would say it all goes down to how badly you want it, right? And that's probably what you want to ask yourself before you really engage in anything. For me, what I've noticed is, and I also say this to all my clients, all the people I work with, is I don't believe a lot in goals. Have you maybe heard me say that, or have I posted?
Yeah,
I think I
definitely.
posted it. But I don't
Explain
believe
that a
in
little bit.
yeah. So I don't believe in goals because they're. I think they go hand in hand with a fixed mindset. So if we see a fixed mindset versus a growth one, right? If we see fixed mindset, I feel that in this bucket we have goals, and goals are very rigid. They put a lot of pressure, right? I had a client who was like, "My goal is to make 20K a month in my business." I said, "Okay, great, but what how is that making you feel?" He's like, "Well, a little bit anxious. I feel a little bit of pressure. And I said, "What would happen if you were to make 15K?" He's like, "Well, I wouldn't have reached my goal." And then what? He's like, "Well, I probably will have to work harder and be better." But you see that the approach is different. He's like already bringing himself down. So what? Just
Mm,
because you made 15K a month, which is more than what you're making right now, let's say he was making 10 and he wants to make 20, and his goal is to make 20, but he makes 15. Really, you're going to be upset? No, that's why I believe a lot in intentions instead, because intentions still set a target, they set an aim, but different things can happen along the way, and that could be even better, right? Maybe, yeah, he meets 15 instead of the 20K he had intended to meet, but by meeting 15, he learned something new about him. He got valuable lessons that maybe he wouldn't have if he wasn't so boxed in. I think the goals box you in, they put so much pressure, right? So to go back to the soft system, it's why, right? What's your intention? If your intention is to make 20K a month, why? What's it going to bring, right? So we need to have a point of focus as to what am I going to focus on? Like, why do I want that? Why do I want that? Why will I focus on that? Why am I going to make that intention? If you have your reason, if your reason is truly reasonable, right? Like you tell me, Tim, what's your reason for starting your coaching business? Why do you coach people?
honestly, the main reason when I peel back all the layers is just to learn and for personal growth. It's very egotistic, but that's the honest
Fair
answer.
enough. And tell me then, what's different in your life when you get to learn about yourself and you get to personally grow?
First off, the process of learning is fun to me. Like it's probably the most fulfilling thing in the world for me. And then secondly, learning about myself, learning about the world makes me make better decisions in the future, which leads to better outcomes in the future.
There you go. There you go. And now that's a it's I'd say it's pretty strong why, and that like you kind of hit the nail on the head. By what you learn and do today, you're being your biggest ally, and then you'll be better off tomorrow, right? And obviously you want that. You want a better life. You want a good life. You want to be able to keep on moving in the direction that best serves you, right? So when you're able to ask yourself why and what's the reason behind doing things, then you can set intentions that are a little bit more close to your heart, that have a little bit more meaning. Because if you think, I mean, I like I told you, and I'll give you just one more example for the soft system as to why, how do you make it so foolproof or so strong? You know, I don't know if, I mean, I don't know if in your audience there's a lot of parents, but a lot of people that I coach and work with, Tim, are parents. And
Maybe my
it doesn't
father is
matter.
watching.
Okay, great. So your father will understand, but it doesn't matter if you're not a parent. Anybody who's even a kid who has a parent will understand what it's like. It's like if you ask, and you could even do this. It's like if I asked you as a parent, would you ever let your child starve? What would a normal parent say, Tim?
Hell no.
Yeah. Would you ever let your kid have no proper sanitation, no toilet paper, no toothpaste, no shower?
Nope.
Exactly. You would do whatever it takes, right, to make it happen. That's commitment. That's fucking commitment. That's real
Mm.
commitment. You would do whatever it takes, right? I remember asking that to one of my parent clients. Tim, they looked at me as if they were going to kill me. Like, what are you saying, man? What do you mean I'm going to leave them? Of course not. He even said, I'll never forget his answer. He said, I would break dance on the street if I need to, right? Like he would break dance on the street if he needs to, which is a crazy answer, but it's true. You would do whatever. You wouldn't care about embarrassing yourself. Whatever it takes, you would do, and that's a soft system. It's you would go no matter the length, and that's because it means something deep inside of you. There's a depth to it. So that's, I think, how you really cultivate that soft system. Does that make sense?
Totally. As for finding that deeper reason, that why,
Mm.
do you have some maybe practical exercises or some mindsets to make that easier for people?
These are good questions, Tim. Um, Thank you for being so prepared and asking these great questions, man. The common answer you hear is probably the anti-vision, right? I'm sure you've heard that a lot. Which is, you heard that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's helpful, and it's definitely helped me. But I do find that the most powerful one to knowing, honestly, I do think that your life's purpose is not something you necessarily find. I do think it's something that will find you. Like take again the story that I shared with you at the very beginning. Yes, I was putting myself out there. I was looking for it, but it kind of found me when I kind of least expected it, if that makes sense. So I was still putting in action. I was still going, but if you really think about it, like before those clients were delivered to me, if as I like to put it, right, because they kind of came out of nowhere. I was doing things that maybe were not even like I was. Do you remember? I was like posting stuff about the social world. I was doing all these things that were not really mindset coaching or life coaching, although that's what I wanted. So I do believe that experimentation is the biggest drive of purpose. Like you have to, like I said at the beginning, put yourself in situations that you're going to fail at, but while taking action. You're going to fail anyway in life. So you might as well fail while taking action than in inaction. And I think practical advice for that is just putting yourself out there. A lot of us wait till we're ready. A lot of us wait till I have one more certificate. I wait until I'm sure you heard that, right? I need one more certificate before I can coach people. There's always one way to serve another human being, even without getting paid. There's always a way to serve another person without getting paid. You can send them a video that resonated with you. There's sometimes I go on X and I'll DM someone, and it doesn't matter if I don't know them. I'll just be like, oh, I saw your post. You were talking about the power of belief. I actually listened to this TED talk the other day. I think you're going to love it. Please watch it and let me know your thoughts. That's me serving the person, and I'm telling them, I'm giving them a pre-context of, it really changed the way I saw the world. It helped me really understand that faith was the biggest predictor of success. Look at the way they talk about Alcoholics Anonymous in here. And then I send that to them, and then the person was like, wow, this was one of the best videos I've ever watched. Thank you. And it's not because I want him to become a client. He didn't become a client, but it was just for me to get into an identity of serving someone. And that's how I ended up finding that's the purpose I want to envision. That's the mission I have in this world is that, at least for me. But I could only find that by trying things out, by doing things that maybe I don't want to do. Right? That's kind of the way I
Mm.
see it is I don't want to do something. Well, maybe it means I should. You know what I mean?
Totally, yeah. I mean, it makes, I think a lot of, especially business owner, they're just, that's what happened to me at least. I can only speak for
Mm,
myself, but I was just working all day, sitting in my room, doing nothing but writing, nothing but sending DMs, nothing but doing whatever I was doing. And I wasn't really challenging myself anymore. Obviously, I
mm,
could cope and say like I'm building my business, I'm building an epic life, but in reality, it was pretty hard to admit this to myself, but I was kind of wasting my time by
mm,
not leaving my comfort zone anymore, especially when it comes to meeting new people, traveling, or physical challenges, maybe, even though I was always doing those. But still, I think it's very easy to cope as a business owner and say,
yeah,
I'm working on my business, I'm busy, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah. It's a great point, man. You got to get out. And when we say get out there, it doesn't necessarily mean physically. Or you can still do, I think it's getting out of that shell or getting out of the comfort zone, right? Which is what we all hear. But I think it's more specific than that, is in being more ballsy with what you do, right? Like you said, if you're gonna send a DM to someone, do it differently this time, right? Try to maybe send a voice note and see how that's different. And it's about what place you're operating from, right? If you're operating from a place of wanting to get a client, that's very different than if you're operating from a place of just serving another human being for the sake of serving them. It's very
mm,
different. It's very different. Like I told you, energy doesn't lie. Energy cannot be faked. So I do think that if people want to find their purpose, one thing that my father told me growing up, Tim, that I think he primed me growing up. I didn't even know it. But when you're a kid and all you hear every single day is dreaming is free, dreaming isn't only for children, especially those two, I'll never forget them. I was like 7 years old, and I think for a whole decade, from seven till I turned 18, till I left for college, every single day I would hear, don't say can't. Who says you can't? Like, do you know for a fact you can't? It's like, no, of course not. He's like, okay, dreaming is free. Dreaming isn't only for children. I know you're a kid now, but you're going to turn 15 and you will not stop dreaming. Even he says, I'm 40 something and I still dream. Right. And I think that's the biggest thing is people are afraid of dreaming. They're so afraid of dreaming. As if it was legal to dream. Right? Dreaming is free. Dreaming is free. And that's the best way to find your life's purpose is you want something bad enough, then put yourself out there, go experiment, go try things out, go mess it up many times and keep moving. Never stop. Just keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And as long as you keep on dreaming and you keep putting in the action of what you want to dream, it's gonna come.
mm. We talked about energy for a moment there.
Mm.
When it comes to energy or state, I've heard you call it state.
Yeah.
Um, State is obviously very important. One rule that I have for writing my daily emails, is I don't write when I'm in a bad mood, because in the bad mood, when I'm in a bad mood, the writing will be worse, and my
Yeah.
audience will have the same energy after reading my emails, and that's not the energy I want them to have. So, how do you go about changing your state or shifting your energy into a more positive one?
Mm. Physiologically. So already like the way you stand. I don't know if I don't know if you can tell I'm standing right now. Like I invested in a standing desk last year on purpose because I realized how much more able I was at building and physically activating a positive and a good aura and energy by standing, right? I'm able to stand a little bit more tall, my shoulders a little bit more back. I'm able to create that, right? I'm able to create this warrior like kind of archetype that we all have in us. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head. You're not going to send an email when you're in a negative state. And like I just told you about my father, how he always told me dreaming is free. You know what else he told me was free, Tim? You know what else he told me was free?
What was it?
Smiling.
Hmm.
Smiling is free. And like now, for example, I read my newsletters. Like I release with my newsletters, I also audio letter them. So I write an audio for them in case, because I have a lot of people who've told me they don't always like reading, or they like listening to it when they're, walking, or they're in the car or whatnot. Um, so I started recording them. And again, my father was like, man, I know we can't see you, but we can hear you and we can feel when you're smiling or not when you read them. So please, say it. And even if you're forcing the smile, if you're in a low, negative, sad, like low energy, like if you fake kind of force your smile, it's gonna shift your energy. It's gonna be as if you released tension. So that's the best and the easiest, and the way science shows to change any state, any energy state, is by physically activating it. By, you want to be more firm, you want to set boundaries, you want to be clear and direct with an employee or with someone. You stand tall, you feel as if there's like grassroots holding you down. You're standing tall, and your energy is a little bit more direct. You want to be a little bit more fool like, light. You shift your attention, you smile, you force it. So there's ways to physically activate it. And I work a lot on that with my clients. Of before every time I will make them, I say, are you sure? Are you sure you're on the right state right now? Are you sure? And many times they're not. So what
Mm,
can you do? And always the easiest one is to smile. Always find a way to smile. Every time I wake up in the morning, Tim, the first thing I do is I force myself to smile. I force myself to smile. It changes everything.
beautiful. One thing that always does it for me is just moving, exercising.
Yeah.
Yesterday, for example, I was in a little bit of a rut in the afternoon.
Okay.
Weather is bad, German winters, it's dark.
Mm.
Um, and then I went for a run. And after that run, I felt amazing. And that's always how it is when I
Man,
train.
it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's all about you're physically activating. You're shifting your focus as well, right? If you really think about it, all you did was you removed your focus from the rut that you were in to a
Mm,
different part, right?
right. That's. I wonder how much of a factor that is.
Big
Makes
one,
total
I'll tell
sense.
you.
Right. I want to circle back to integrity,
Mm,
and I really like that idea of keeping your own promises. However, I will also interject and say that there are certain people, I'm definitely one of them, you might be one of them as well, who just hold themselves to incredibly high standards,
mm,
impossible standards. So, how did you overcome those? How did you learn to set more realistic expectations, and so you stop beating yourself up about not, or about always falling short about your unrealistic expectations?
mm. Yeah, I mean, most of us are high achievers, right? So, and I'm guessing most of your audience here also is, right? Mm. It's a great question. Yeah, I definitely do believe that standards, the quality of your standards, are what's going to help you meet those objectives, those intentions that you have for yourself, right? At the end, standards are like the thing that you're willing to tolerate in order to meet those milestones, to meet those objectives. So how do you make sure they're not unrealistically high? Once again, I'd say it's experimentation, but the biggest mindset shift for me, Tim, was kind of treating myself like a puppy. If do you know what I mean by that?
That's actually quite cool. Yeah. Explain that a little bit more.
So in short, it's approaching everything, like I said, with no judgment. And what I mean by that is, like, if you think of a puppy who maybe when they're a puppy, they just came into your house, you just adopted them, you just bought them, you just rescued them, what have you. You bring them home, and most probably they're going to start pooping everywhere. They won't know. They haven't been potty trained. You can think the same with a baby. Even when a baby is born, you give them food, they barf it out, right? You give them carrots, they throw it away. If they're like even when they're 3 years old. So why am I saying treat yourself like a puppy or like a baby? Well, when that happens, when a baby does that or a puppy does that, you don't judge them. You treat them with grace. You treat them with compassion. You're seeing them from a point of view of, okay, oh, they're uninformed. We haven't taught them just yet. We haven't showed them yet the ropes. They don't know yet that they have to go and poop in this section, that they have to wait till we get outside the house to poop, or they have to go to the garden to go pee and do their business, right? They don't know yet. So they're just uninformed. Self-development is the same thing. Personal growth is the same thing. It's a game of noticing. not a game of judgment. You can only change things once you notice them, once you're aware of them. So same for your own standards, right? Put yourself certain standards and see. And if you don't reach them, then it's just a cue to reevaluate, to re-examine, and to see what's maybe a more attainable and a more realistic standard. But you can only know that once again if you experiment and use. That's why I'm a big proponent of the science experiment. Our lives are just are an experiment, and life is a series of tests. And you can just collect data, collect data, collect data, and you keep on iterating. So at the end, it's that. And whenever you make a mistake, whenever you fail, whenever you poop when you were not supposed to, it's just a cue to not judge yourself. Just treat it with grace, treat it with compassion, and it serves you. If you take that approach and you see it from a place of grace and compassion, it'll always serve you regardless of the outcome. And how
Mm,
much better is that, Tim? How much better is that?
so much better. One thing that prevented me from doing that
Mm,
last year, nowadays I'm trying to cultivate that. I'm actually making a lot of progress in that area. But the thing that was holding me back then was thinking that if I was kind to myself, if I showed grace, then I would lose my drive. I would
mm,
become undisciplined. I would lose all of my motivation. I would, go back to being purposeless, not doing anything with my time. Rationally, I know that that's bullshit and that that's just an excuse, but
mhm,
emotionally, I think a lot of people are still stuck in that mindset. So, what can you say on that?
mm. I mean, you tell me then what changed now? You said you're better at it now. What changed?
I just tried it out and saw that it was much better.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that'll do it for sure, but how to get I see what you're saying of it'll take away your drive maybe if you're being kind, but I just also think it depends on the way you're being. Like I think the truth cannot be bent, right?
Mm,
It's always there. It's the truth. So you gotta get in the habit of also being honest with yourself, and that's where awareness comes. If you can be aware without judgment, and you've already made the decision with yourself that you're gonna approach it from the perspective of non-judgment, and I'm gonna approach it from the perspective of pure, real, genuine awareness, then it's a very different approach. And of course, it takes time. Of course, it takes practice. And yeah, sometimes maybe being too kind with yourself isn't the approach. But I think I don't even know if kind is the word. I'd say it's you can be gracious and compassionate with yourself while still being hard, right? Like I can still show up and be gentle on my body. Like if I take the example, Tim, of I was sick the other day and I was feeling ill and I still had to do a client session. I wasn't going to cancel because I still was able to do it. I can still show up and serve and be my best self. I can still even go to the gym that day, for example, but I can still treat my body a little bit more gently. I can drink way more water. I can make sure I don't push myself to a 10 out of 10 today at the gym. I can push myself to a 7 or a 6, and I'm still being gentle with my body. So there's still a way to be gracious and compassionate while still letting your drive continue, while still being hard on yourself. Does
mm.
that make sense?
Yeah. There's this Tony Robbins quote that
Tell me.
I'm going to butcher it, but um, it was something like once you have drive, it's never going to leave you, no matter what you do. And I
Yeah.
really like that idea. For me, what it's done, showing more grace to myself, is it has removed a bit of the drive in some areas of life.
Mm.
But the reason that was the case was because I never really cared about them anyways. It
Mm.
was just superficial. And it
Yeah.
really showed me that I was, slacking in other areas that were important to me for superficial desires. Like, for example, I realized that money really isn't a motivating factor for me. It is to an extent, it is for everyone, but it's not as important as I thought it was. So some days I felt like, why am I even working on this business? And it really forced me to think about how can I make my business more aligned with myself. So
Mm.
it doesn't only get me money, obviously that's important, but it also really fulfills me and is aligned with who I want to become. So
Mm.
it is very scary to let go of that inner slave master because it's
Mm,
gonna uncover all of the bullshit you're telling yourself. For example, those superficial desires, status, you
yeah.
want to impress other people, you want to impress that childhood bully or something. So it's it's very chaotic, and sometimes it's not comfortable, but it has been worth the sacrifice for me, and it's made my life so much better. I'm so much happier because of this.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That's a great example, Tim. And you're an inspiration, my friend, because for a lot of people, they don't see it that way. And sometimes it's also seeing what's on the other side of it, right? Like, if you know what's waiting for you, if you don't do what you're set out to do, what you want to do, if you don't do it and you know what's waiting for you, you can create a very vivid picture of what's waiting for you. Like for me, when I told you my story, I knew that after my 12 months of that deal with my father, if I didn't honor that deal, if I didn't keep my word, I knew that I was going to those cubicles. I knew that I was have to go through the embarrassment of getting my father to get me a job. I knew that I would have to tell people, "Oh, I got this job thanks to my father who did this," or I mean, even maybe worse than that. There's way worse than having to say how you got the job. It's living the job every single day, going to a 9 to 5, doing something you hate, right? And I was very vivid about it. I created a very mental, clear picture of what would happen if I didn't honor this deal. And like I said, for some people, depending on your circumstance, your upbringing, who you are, where you live, sometimes it's easier than others to find that drive. And another word, that I love that I use instead of drive is hunger, right? How do you reignite that hunger? How do you keep that hunger? And I do agree with Tony Robbins. I love Tony Robbins. And I do agree with that of, once you have that drive, it's very hard for it to leave. Yes, I believe a lot there's different seasons of life. And in some seasons of your life, your hunger might be at a 10, but your hunger cannot stay at a 10 out of 10 forever. Just like social anxiety, right? Tim, if you have social anxiety, when you first enter a party or a gathering or a nightclub, your social anxiety might be off the roof, 10 out of 10. But once you get there, exposure therapy, right? It'll go down. It won't stay at a 10 out of 10 forever. It's the same thing with hunger. Hunger cannot stay at a 10 out of 10 forever, but it's there. It's there. And if you do lose it for whatever reason, if you're saying, oh, I'm being too kind with myself and I feel my drive going down, well, then you just got to light a fire under your ass once again, right? You got to light that fire under your ass and kind of like eliminate that crash pad. And again, sometimes, like you said, you make up from a family that, you have a roof over your head, you have parents who are willing to support you. Like that was the case for me. I had to kind of artificially create that fire and kind of had to artificially remove that crash pad. How did I do that? By locking in a deal, by literally
Mm,
getting my father and I to like almost sign a contract that kept me accountable. I'm not kidding, but it's the truth. Like I had to really remove that crash pad, remove that safety net, kind of put my back against the wall. And when your back is against the wall, you have no choice but to keep on running. And then your drive is there. Does that make sense?
mm, so much sense. Yeah, and looking back on the phases where I've made the most progress in my life, it was always when I had a little bit of pressure, whether it was self-created or whether it was from outside circumstances.
Mm,
It was never too much pressure. Too much pressure can crush you, but it was always just the right amount of pressure
well
to
said.
where I got my ass up, woke up in the morning and did my work. Right,
Well
that
said.
was
Well said, man. Well said. And
yeah.
that's why, if I just may say one thing to what you said there, is you said it. Too much pressure can definitely crush you. And I think for that, only you will know what's the right kind of pressure. It kind of goes back to the standards thing you asked, right? How do you know what's the right kind of standards? How do you know what's the right kind of pressure? Well, yes, one is testing it out, but once again, getting to know yourself better than anybody else, which you do by cultivating a habit, a daily practice of sitting with your thoughts, observing your thoughts, being with your thoughts, getting familiar with them, which you could do many ways through taking intentional walks alone with no input, no phone, no music, no podcast, or meditating, sitting in silence and just observing the thoughts, or what was it, for some people it's driving, for some people it's taking a shower, right? Just or journaling is a great one, but that's kind of how you kind of treat a science experiment, right, of your life. You're getting to know yourself better by the day. Does that make sense as well?
Yeah, totally. I would love that idea of running experiments.
Yeah.
That's how you incrementally improve your life, make better decisions.
Yes, sir.
Um, you talked about in that 12-month period where you made that contract with your father. You talked about changing your identity or your self image.
Mm,
How did you go about that?
mm. The real reason, the real way was my language, man. I'd say. I mean, and what I mean by my language is I say is the words that came out of my mouth. So the way I described myself. So then, for example, if I used to say I am a procrastinator, or I am any, and insert any word here that doesn't serve you, right? I used to be someone who used to hate mornings, for example. Tim, this is the true story. Every morning I'd wake up and I was, especially when I came back from college and I was very lost. I remember I came back home, like I told you, trying to apply for all those jobs. I was living alone for 5 years, and then you come back home to live with your parents again. I remember I was not that I was upset to live with them. I loved living with them, but it was like it was, I don't know, it felt like, all my friends are in London, they're joining investment banks, corporate world, and here I am, like, lost. It wasn't easy. So I don't know that if that's why I hated mornings, but I just woke up always in a bad mood. Like, my energy, my state was so bad, and it became a running joke in my family, man, that they were like, Julian is allergic to the morning time. And a lot of it had to be my energy. Like, I wasn't smiling. I was never in a good mood. I was never, like, I was always low and down. It took like a couple hours to get out of me. Everybody knew, don't talk to Julian in the morning. It sucks talking to him. It just became a thing. And that was part of my identity. So what changed during those first 6 months, although I made very little money, I believe it was the main foundation for my growth, was because I was developing new identities. Like I said, I was forcing myself to wake up and smile. I was forcing myself to, do things I never did before. Like, first thing I did was wake up and it was not touch my phone. It was very hard when that's all you did for the past X amount of years. So I would force myself. And that's when I say systems. I had a system of not putting my phone by my bedside table, buying an actual alarm clock so I didn't have to use my phone as an alarm. That's a system. That's a hard system that helps me honor that. And then the soft system is, like I said, how badly do I want it? And it helps, every day before you go to bed, you remind yourself, why do I want this? And I will start doing things I never did. I never journaled before. So I got in a habit of journaling. Of course, at the beginning, like everything, it sucks. It's hard when your body, your brain wants to do familiar things, right? Because familiarity breeds predictability, and predictability breeds control. If you can control it, then you know what to expect. And that's what you want. So you have to do new things. And for me, like I said, I was doing new things that I had never done before. I stopped going out. I used to go out so much, used to party, used to drink, used to see my friends. I used to be a huge social person, and I still am, but I had to do it in a different way. I had to stop going. I had to wake up at a time that was reasonable, right? And that all starts with your identity. And I go back to language is the way you create yourself, right? Language creates everything. The words that come out of your mouth are crazy. I don't know if you've heard the Bruce Lee quote, but Bruce Lee says, it's called spelling. Why is it called spelling? Because you cast spells with your words. Have you heard
Hmm.
that?
I didn't know that. That's great.
But it's true. You're casting spells, like, and language creates. Like, if I told you, Tim, like, this video I'm about to send you of Tony Robbins is the best video I've seen, Tim. It's the best video I've seen. Like, it's changed my life. It's the video that got me from 0 to 7K a month. Like, man, you need to watch this video. You need to watch this video. Like, it changed everything for me. Right? How different are you going to watch that video if I just didn't say anything? I just said you here, just watch it. How different,
I'll just
right?
watch while I'm doing something else.
That's what I'm saying. At the end, the language you use, and again, to go back, sorry, to your question, the main question is the language you use about yourself. Start mastering the words you say. Start creating yourself in the way you want to. What goes back to integrity. Say one thing and do it, right? Let your language hold so much weight and so much gold that every word you say has intention, right? And it even goes to the way you create yourself. I am the best fucking coach. And even if there's other best fucking coaches all over the world, it's okay. You can be your best fucking coach for your client, for that client who's standing right in front of you. But you want to match that, right? And your brain's going to do whatever it can to close that gap, even if it's not there yet. Even if you say, I am, insert something, whatever you want there, your brain's going to do whatever it can to close that gap. It's going to do whatever it can to close it. So your language is the most important thing to really build your identity, I'd say, while
Mm,
also matching the energy we talked about, the state. You can only really change the words you say and the story you say about yourself if you change your state first. So you want to activate a peak state to then change the story you say. The story you say will only be way more powerful if you're in a peak state, right?
mm. Cool. You talk a lot about journaling
Mm.
introspection. I want to hear about some of your favorite journaling prompts because I'm into journaling myself. I like
Mm.
learning about myself through journaling. Journaling. So, what are some of your favorite prompts?
Ooh. You know, I don't use prompts anymore because it's become so ingrained in me. But to be honest, before I used to the prompt I used to always go to was I remember it was I think my first mentor was the one that 2 years ago gave it to me because I just started journaling like 2 years ago, I guess, properly. And I think it was, what went well, what didn't, and then based on what didn't, what's one thing that I can do a little bit better or 1% better tomorrow? What's one thing I can implement tomorrow that's 1% better? Those were the three that I would use all the time. Now I don't. Now my main prompt is just free flow of my thoughts. I just really kind of, and sometimes I will notice, Tim, I don't know if this happens to you, man, but you will sit with the journal and the pen, and sometimes it's like just an influx of thoughts come in that feel like would have not come if I just did. And sometimes I won't even write, and I'm there
Mm,
for like 10 minutes, and I'm like, whoa,
yeah,
does that happen to you?
totally. Every
Yeah.
other
What's
day.
one of your prompts that you like the most?
Some Well, the very obvious one is just what am I grateful for? I think that's the
Mm,
basic one that I think
that's a
everyone
beautiful one. That's a
has to
beautiful one,
use.
man. That's a beautiful
Um,
one. But do you find yourself still like, do you write prompts and then you answer the questions, or is it
no,
just
not
in your
really.
head?
It's just in my head. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. I do that more maybe in my meditations then, those kind of prompts.
Mm, also good. I feel like with gratitude, it can become a chore if you just say I'm gonna write down three things every night that I'm grateful for, and it just becomes
Yeah.
annoying. With gratitude, to get the benefits, you really have to feel it in your entire body.
Mm,
So what I've started doing is instead of doing daily gratitude, is doing weekly gratitude, writing
mm,
out all of the things that happened to me this week that I'm grateful for, and that gives me so many more points or things to be grateful for because an entire week is much longer than a day. And if you've had a really shitty day, it can be very, very hard to come up with things that you're grateful for and really feel them. So that's what I've started doing.
yeah, man.
Has been hence transformative for me.
I love that, Tim. I love that, man. That's a great one. Yeah, and there's nothing more beautiful than gratitude. I think it was even Tony Robbins who said, you can't be grateful and annoyed at the same time. You can't be
Mm.
grateful and angry at the same time. Like, you just can't. So gratitude is the ultimate force.
Okay, Julian, thanks for being on. I really enjoyed talking to you. It was very, very insightful. There's a lot of things that I'm going to implement, that I'm going to test out in my own life. But what are your plans for the future? What have you got coming up?
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me, and thank you for these wonderful questions. It's I can't believe it passed so quick. I just saw it's already been an hour, man. But thank you for listening with your best listening. I can tell. Um, Real quickly, my plans for the future. I'm actually cooking up a little community that's starting soon for myself. I wanted to, because now I have my coaching practice that's been going well, and I've been investing a lot of my time and energy into that. But I have a lot of people that my mission is to serve as many people as I possibly can. And for that to happen, I want to be able to reach more people. And I know one way to do that is, with the community, at lower price points for one, for people who maybe can't afford the one on one, but who also maybe not just financially, just some people just don't have the time to do one on ones. People don't have the energy to do one on one. So sometimes having a community with pre recorded courses or live Q&As or live classes like these would be amazing. So that's what I'm currently working on right now. I have a workshop coming up maybe in a month that will maybe announce this community there. We'll see how we're doing it yet. It's still talking about it now, but that's for sure happening. The community is happening for sure. At the end of year retreat is also in the works in person,
Mm,
so that'll be great. Definitely starting to plan that too. But anyway, these are, like I said, my intentions, and now I'm just setting up the systems to make them a real commitment and turn them into reality. So we'll see how it goes. I'll be documenting the journey, and yeah, my man.
lovely, man.
Thanks for
Everybody,
asking.
go drop Julian a follow, subscribe to his email list, subscribe to his YouTube channel. By the way, I like your vlogs, they're amazing.
Thank you, man. You'll
Thanks for
follow the journey of the retreats and stuff on there. You'll see.
thanks for being on, Julian.
Thank you, Tim. Man, always a joy to get to speak to you and to have you. And thank you for having me. It's a true honor. So much love, my friend. Thank you.